Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM, channel 141. This is the Inside segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Now, they may not be on the front lines, but they are the nation's youngest heroes who exhibit incredible strength, flexibility, and sacrifice every day. We are talking about the children of military families. April is designated as the month of the military child. And tonight we're going to talk about that resilience and some of the challenges faced by military children and their families. My guest tonight is Tony Woods. He is Secretary of the Maryland Department of Veterans and Military Families. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. I appreciate it. And of course, certainly thank you for your service, sir.
Harold, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's talk about a few fast facts, first of all. And I was not really aware of this. There are 1.6 million military children in the U.S., and Maryland has more than 35,000 military-connected children. And on average, military families move every 2 to 3 years. Before we get into a discussion about military children, share with us some insight into your office, the Maryland Department of Veterans and Military Families. Specifically, what is your role?
Yeah, so I have the privilege of working for Governor Moore as his Secretary of Veterans and Military Families. Our mission is essentially to lead veterans, service members, and their families through life's transitions, ensuring that they receive the resources and the support that they've earned through service. And that can take a wide range of things. You know, the history of the department, created in 1999 and built over time. And we really focused initially on the veteran community, of which here in Maryland, we have over 350,000 veterans. But what we also realize is this broader military connected community, well, we have a responsibility to make sure they have a good experience when they come to Maryland as well. And so, fortunately, after partnering with the legislature and at the championing by the governor, we actually changed the name of our department from the Department of Veterans Affairs to the Department of Veterans and Military Families, because we recognize the impact of service is on more than just that service member or that veteran. It also is on the caregivers, the family members, the survivors, the kids. Well, they're also impacted by service too, and we want them to know they have a champion here in Annapolis and all across the state.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. As a longtime Marylander, I am certainly familiar with the name of the Department of Veterans Affairs for the state, and certainly a lot of people are familiar with the federal branch of Veterans Affairs, as it were. But that change does make a significant, I think, impact, because, as you said, we all know about the work of veterans, but sometimes families and children don't always get the kind of recognition or support that those inside or even outside the military in the state have a chance to be impacted by.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And one thing I often point out, and when we were sort of looking at changing the name of the department, was, Maryland is home to 14 installations and facilities all over the state. We've got over 45,000 active military service members. And then when you add in their families, another 60,000 or so of them. Veteran caregivers are playing an even greater role than they used to, because thanks to advances of military medicine, a lot of our service members now survive injuries on the battlefield that they may not have in wars past. So they come home with very significant challenges, and veteran caregivers play a vital role in supporting them. And then, of course, we have lost many Marylanders over years, and their surviving families, well, there are still challenges associated with their loved one's service, and we want to be there for them too, right? And so we just realized that, if you create a thriving family around that veteran or that service member, well, the veteran and the service member are going to thrive too. We realized at all of those sort of key transition points, if you're not taking care of the family, they're the ones who spot if things aren't going right. They're the ones who are advocating and supporting that veteran or service member through tough times. And frankly, they need somebody who's going to be there for them so they know where to turn to. So we thought that name change was really just important and signifying and making sure members of the military connected community, more broadly defined, understand there's somebody here who cares about their issues, wants to stand up for them, and is going to advocate for them.
Let's talk about the month of the military child. What is, in your mind, the significance of having a very specific recognition for children in military families?
Yeah, well, you mentioned this already, but we've got over 30,000 military connected kids who call Maryland home. And one of the things that we realized is that, the impact of their parents' service is significant on them. You mentioned this at the beginning, but over the course of a young person's K through 12 experience, a military connected kids K through 12 experience, they're going to move on average 6 to 9 different times, right? So that is a disruption to their social bonds and connections. That is certainly a disruption to their education and their learning process. And then if you add into it a young person who has a special need or special academic needs, even more impactful on them. Of course, if a parent is deployed, that puts a strain on the household and, of course, brings in concern and stress for that household as well. So we just realized it's important for folks to understand that, we often thank the service member for their service, but we have military spouses and military kids who really deserve that thank you as well. And so we're glad that this month is honoring the sacrifices of military connected kids and showcasing the courage, the resilience, the patriotism, frankly, that they bring to our country and the sacrifices that they make throughout the month of April. We'll be doing that with events, of course. And then, of course, throughout the entire year, we want to make sure we're doing what we can to support them.
Well, since you mentioned it, kind of give us a rundown of some of the things that the state is doing this month regarding those events and how people can participate, find out more information about it.
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say is go to our website, veterans.maryland.gov, because one of the wonderful things that we've done as an organization is realize we as a department can't do it all. So we have terrific partners working under the banner of what we call Maryland Joins Forces. And these exceptional partners, 25 of them thus far, are helping to bring new events every single day. So you can go to our website to find that. But some examples that I'll just sort of highlight. First one is on April 11th. We are asking the military community to wear purple for Purple Up Day. So this is just a day to recognize military children and their families. The next day on April 12th, we're actually co-hosting a Military Kids Day and a family tailgate at the men's Army-Navy lacrosse game. I, of course, will only be rooting for Army. And that's going to be at the
Are you sure?
No offense, anyone. And that's going to be at the Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium here in Annapolis. So that'll be a wonderful one. But there's a host of other events that are going to be taking place throughout the month. And again, if they go to veterans.maryland.gov, and you can see those events right there on our page, and they'll be changing throughout the month.
You were deployed when you were active duty. Mm-hmm. What kind of conversations did you have with service members who had children?
Mm-hmm. That was one of the things that, I thought, you always sort of make the mistake of thinking that the soldier or the service member has it the hardest, right? And I quickly realized that in my own experience, my mom back home and realizing the stress that she was going through and realizing that, okay, it's not just me here, but I saw it with my soldiers too, especially those who had kids at the time. They were trying to get back after our mission and run to the internet cafe to do a bedtime story reading with their kid, right? Could you imagine doing that from thousands of miles away and trying to make sure that you're reminding that young person that they are still loved and that you care about them and they can see them and you can be involved in their life, right? So that sacrifice works both ways, right? That obviously that's very hard for the parent, the service member, to be abroad and away from their kids, but for a child and that military spouse to have that absence is really significant. And I think that's why both Governor Moore, myself, and Lieutenant Governor Miller completely agreed that we need to do more to recognize those sacrifices. It's what motivated the name change, and it's why we're just excited to be leaning into opportunities like this to amplify the experience of everyone around those who serve as well.
To that point, when you were deployed in Iraq and were having some of these, whether it was conversations, whether it was just making some of the observations, and I was particularly struck. This was not being like deployed in South Korea. This was not like being deployed at NATO headquarters. This was Iraq. This was certainly the Middle East. There was an element of danger that was always present, even if there were good days, good weeks. I think it is safe to say that the stress that some of these parents were feeling may have impacted the children. Talk to me about that kind of balance.
That's exactly right. And this is why this month is just so important. It's not just the service member who experiences that stress. It's the entire family unit. One of the things that kind of comes to mind with your question is when I was deployed both times, if a service member was killed in the line of duty from your particular forward operating base, they would shut down internet access and telephone access for every service member on that base because they didn't want their fellow soldiers or service members to accidentally reach out to the family and notify them of their loss before that service member's family was notified officially by the military. But what that meant, as tragic as that is it also meant that you are no longer communicating with your own family. For that 2, 3, sometimes 4-day experience when they've got to keep all communications shut down, that family is wondering, well, wait a minute, am I going to get a knock on the door? Right? And when you think about that from the lens of a military kid, I haven't heard from mom or dad in 4 or 5 days. I know they're somewhere dangerous. But then they have to go and concentrate on school, concentrate on extracurriculars, keep on doing their chores, right? That's going to have a significant impact on that young person and on their lives. And I think it's actually why it's so important. And one of the other initiatives that we champion is we encourage Maryland schools and all schools across the country where this exists to become Purple Star schools. And what that means is these are schools who have teachers and administrations that understand, have gone through a little bit of additional training and understand the experience of military kids, know to be more curious, know to ask questions, know to check in if that person's parent is deployed, because there are significant impacts on that young person, and it'll make for a better, more welcoming school environment for them.
Could that mean, and ask me if I'm stretching it just a little bit, but could that very well mean the governor's administration, and by default yourself, maybe advocating for school systems across the state to look at hiring veterans?
Oh, absolutely. So that comes in response to what we've seen going on at the federal level with the layoffs that are occurring with our federal government employees. What folks don't often realize is 1 out of every 3 federal employees is a veteran. And so what we are seeing is actually one of the largest mass veteran firing events that has ever occurred. But Governor Moore, recognizing that this is a time to mobilize and bring solutions, is also realizing, well, wait a minute, whether they're a veteran or not, this federal employee who is now, thanks to no fault of their own, out of a job, well, that's a mission-driven person who cares about working on causes that are greater than themselves. And what better way to do that than to become a teacher? The impact that you can have on a young person's life is significant. Here in Maryland, we need more teachers in order to reduce classroom size, allow for additional prep time, all of these things. We have a crisis, frankly, in our number of teachers, or the gaps that we have, the vacancies. And so we are trying to match the need of these federal workers with the need of the state, and finding an opportunity for them to play a vital role in educating our next generation. And we think it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for them.
Hold on for a moment. We are going to take a break, but don't forget you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about the resilience and challenges faced by military children and families. We continue with Tony Woods, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Veterans and Military Families. Mr. Secretary, often when meeting new people, we can ask, well, where are you originally from? And often that the answer for adult children of military families is, oh, I'm a military brat. I'm from all over.
That's right.
What does that mean? I mean, other than the obvious, which is they may have been stationed or with their family stationed in Texas or California or overseas, but beyond the actual geographic locations, how does that make military children or even adult children different?
It's a great point. And, we often do this, and it's true on the veteran side of this kind of conversation too. We often talk about the challenges that veterans face, or service members face, or in this case, military kids face. And it's true. They move, like I said, 6 to 9 times during their K through 12 years. They deal with the stress of deployments, all those things. But what it also does is create real strength in these young people, right? So that military brat, as you said, that phrase I love, that person has moved a tremendous number of times. They've also known how to make fast friends, be self-reliant, be resilient, have strength, have courage to walk up to a new person who they don't know, or a new table of kids at a new school, and introduce themselves and sit down and dive right in, right? So the interpersonal skills, the social skills that they develop, the resilience they're able to build because of the frequent moves and changes. Well, these are traits and attributes that they're going to carry with them for the rest of their life, And so, it is a strength and it's a benefit in some ways. But it comes as a result of hardship they've gotten through and they've persevered through. And so I think it's just all the more reason why it's important that we thank them for their contributions to our nation's defense as military kids, and acknowledge the sacrifices that they've had to make as well.
But when you talk about minor children, for example, whether they are younger than the age of 10 or they're teenagers, I'm quite sure that it can be extremely difficult, particularly when you have established those really solid connections, and then you have to go. Certainly the internet helps, but
a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. But I can imagine that it is still, a difficult emotional adjustment.
Absolutely. And this is why, for those who are familiar, just a couple of years ago, we asked Governor Moore to recommit the state to what's called the Governor's Challenge to End Suicide Amongst Service Members, Veterans, and their families. Because it's that and their families component that reminds us of the significant stress and strain that military spouses and military kids are under as a result of the service of their military connected loved one, their service member loved one. And so it has real impacts on the entire family, and in big ways and in small ways. As serious as risk of suicide with our military spouse population, we see a staggering 21% unemployment And again, think about the financial strain that has as a result of frequent moves to different installations over that service member's career. And so it puts a real strain on the family. And that is why we thought it was just important to rename ourselves, because we have to lean in and dedicate ourselves to understanding the unique challenges they face and come up with very real solutions. And so that is why we are working with partners to bring about those solutions for our military connected family members.
Talk to me about the partners. Who are they?
So we actually have a wonderful initiative. We called it Maryland Joins Forces, as I mentioned before. What we decided to do is we said, look, the challenges that our military connected community faces, they're pretty well known to us. They're not shy about it, and they tell us what they are. And we pretty quickly coalesced around 5 key issue areas. The first one is education. The second one is employment. Again, going back to that military spouse unemployment number. One that folks don't often realize, food insecurity is a very significant challenge amongst our lower enlisted active duty service member families, but also sort of broadly in the veteran and military space. Housing insecurity, another challenge. So we've sort of said food and housing insecurity is sort of bucket number 3 that we care tremendous about. Health and wellness. And within that health and wellness is our suicide prevention work. It's a very real challenge. And then finally, our military connected community wants to feel a sense of belonging and connection to their civilian counterparts. And so we have an obligation to find those meaningful chances to engage with and serve alongside in some cases, or just get to know one another better. So there is increased sort of connection throughout our community. And so we said, okay, if those are our 5 priority areas, well, we need to find folks who are the best at doing that or solving that or addressing that need. And so we set about to go create new partnerships. We've entered into formal MOUs with 25 different organizations. I'll highlight just a couple. The first one, Hiring Our Heroes, is a wonderful organization. It's an initiative of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. And what they do over the last 15 or so years, they literally help to get millions of veterans and transitioning service members hired into new roles. And so you can imagine that partnership played huge dividends when we said, hey, wait a minute, we are watching the federal government lay off thousands of veterans. We need you to mobilize. We need you to step in and help to create events here in Maryland. Related to that, we have a partnership with LinkedIn, which all of us know is a wonderful platform where you can kind of go find your next job and showcase the skills that you have. And so we partnered with them to help military spouses spruce up their LinkedIn pages and find out the resources that they have available to them to help them find their next opportunity. Another organization we've partnered with, I'll sort of share this as the last example, is Blue Star Families. I would say it's the nation's premier advocacy organization for military connected families. And so we've partnered with them to help on that kind of belonging piece. That's a big one, but also on some of our education related initiatives. How do we help military families successfully transition into Maryland schools more seamlessly? And so we've run the spectrum with our partners. We're growing that list every single day, and they're making a huge difference for our military families here in Maryland.
I think that there may be a percentage of the population who is not connected in any way, shape, or form to military families or have that military experience, that listening to this conversation may be surprised that for the lower enlisted, that there is an issue with food insecurity and housing insecurity. Mm-hmm. Is there a story that is being told, or an assumption that the armed forces is taking care of everyone?
You know, it's one of those sorts of things. When I cite the statistic that 26% of our lower enlisted families aren't exactly sure where they are going to find their next meal, that is a staggering statistic. It is deeply concerning. The Department of Defense has started to respond by adding additional subsistence programs. Many folks don't realize who are lower enlisted, who have kids, that they qualify for SNAP. So there's this sort of expectation or assumption that if somebody is ready, willing, and able to raise their right hand, swear an oath to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic, up to and including a willingness to sacrifice their entire life, you would think that they should be paid enough where they won't have to worry about keeping a roof over their head or um, finding their next meal. Right. So it is a surprising, jaw-dropping statistic when I tell folks that. But it's why it's just so important for us to mobilize partners to step in and shine a light on this issue. And the Department of Defense, of course, is taking it seriously, but we realize there's more to be done. And we, as a state, play a really important role in making sure that a military family is successful when they move into our state, right? This is why Governor Moore was so laser focused on affordable housing, because we realize it's a challenge, not just for our military community, it's a challenge for all of us, right? So efforts to lower that. It's why we have we passed the Family Serve Act, which actually allows for military spouses to get 10 points added to their competitive application when they are applying for a Maryland state government role, just like a veteran gets. But similarly, it allows private sector employers to also have preferential hiring programs for military spouses, right? So if you get 2 earners in a household, that helps to drive down the risk of food insecurity and housing insecurity, and really makes a big difference for that military family. These are just a few examples of a number of pro-military family bills and policies that we've enacted over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I think I was peripherally aware of that, but to hear you speak about some of these statistics, certainly we know that there are families, and when we talk about families, we're not just talking about spouses. We are also, of course, talking about children, which is how this conversation began. Having access to the PX, where prices are significantly less than they are for civilians, in the marketplace. But those same kinds of issues that affect civilian children outside of the military, where we know that children study better, do better in school when they have full bellies when they go in, when there aren't the kind of issues of housing insecurity that, as you said, become a problem. So when you look at just how your office and all of these other challenges are going to be impacted, as you know, this has been a very difficult budget session. Probably one of the most difficult in the state's modern history. What were you able to secure, or was the governor able to earmark, as my mother would say, a couple of quarters for your office when, because Lord knows, there was no money.
Yeah. So the great news is you're exactly right. Governor Moore and Lieutenant Governor Miller have shown incredible leadership in working with the legislature to address the challenges that we inherited from the previous administration and from many previous administrations, right? There were structural deficits written into how we fund our government that were essentially papered over by the sort of influx of COVID era federal funds. And that papered over and made what was actually a structural deficit look like a small surplus. And Governor Moore, realizing what was happening here, is that's no way to run a government, to just sort of kick this can down the road. And so we made the very tough decision to find efficiencies where possible, increase revenue where necessary, and make adjustments along the course to get us back. What I will say, though, is my department was actually very fortunate. The governor and lieutenant governor have stayed committed to supporting our veterans. And so we've actually seen no cuts that will impact our programs in any significant way, because we recognize what is happening at the federal level requires us to mobilize and respond to support the veteran and military family community. And fortunately, we have the resources to do exactly that.
Talk to me a little bit more about military children. I'll preface this with my experience as it relates to adult children, where particularly those that have lived abroad as a result of deployment. And it seems to me, anecdotally speaking, that a lot of them have a different worldview. They are more open-minded because they have not just experienced people from different parts of the United States, but indeed different parts of the world.
Mm-hmm. I think you're exactly right. And frankly, it's one of the things that I would highlight as a benefit of military service, right? And how it can be a benefit to the family if folks are thoughtful about understanding the sacrifices that we're also asking them to make. Because you're exactly right. It is a chance to see the world. I'll point to my family's experience. My grandfather served in the Air Force, joining in the 50s, and did a full career, served in Vietnam. And that inspired my mom to also serve in the Air Force, where she met my dad, who was in the Air Force. She came back to Travis Air Force Base, where it had me, where I was born. She left the Air Force because she can't be a single parent in the Air Force. But I got to grow up going to Travis Air Force Base school district schools. And most of my friends, they had parents who were military connected. And what that did is it inspired me to consider service, right? And so that is why I decided to apply to West Point and join the Army, because I knew, much like Governor Moore says, I knew that service would save me and provide a pathway for something different. And I raised that because our military connected kids are far more likely to join the military because they've seen that example of service demonstrated by their parent, right? And so I think that there's something to be said. I don't want military service to be the family business for a select few. I want to, of course, encourage all folks to consider military service, but it is something I do appreciate about our military connected family members, our military connected kids, is they more often than not serve disproportionately higher rates than their civilian peers. And so I do think, despite the hardships that we've talked about, despite changing schools and trying to transfer records and breaking up friendships and all these types of things that they experience throughout that, or dealing with the stress of a deployment, they come out of it more resilient, with a global view of the world, having experienced these things, and they come out with a strong sense of patriotism and a desire to serve. And I think that's admirable, and it's something that we should celebrate throughout this month.
What was wrong with Annapolis?
I will tell you, being here in Annapolis, it has actually made me more belligerent in my anti-Naval Academy bias. I do, of course, have a tremendous amount of respect for my Navy siblings, but I don't know. The West Point's a hard place to be. The Naval Annapolis is beautiful, and I think it just means they have an easy ride here.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing. I'm
and they
sure
can fight me on it.
Right. I'm sure the views from the Hudson were not too terribly bad. You may
The
not
views were nice, but when it's 5 degrees and the wind is coming down there at 60 miles an hour, it's not a pleasant place to be. But it is it made me into the person I am today.
We did talk about some of the challenges. What is the thing that has surprised you the most about your interaction with military families when you were active duty, and how do you suspect that is helping you in this role now?
Again, I think it was just that experience. When I sat down in my interview with Governor Moore for this role, the first thing we talked about was, hey, I think we have an opportunity to lean in and do something special for the family, military families, because we instantly knew, wait a minute, they sacrifice a lot too. I mentioned this, but when I came home from my deployments, I realized I could see the look of stress and anxiety on my mom's face. There's a reason why here in my office in Annapolis, I have the Blue Star flag that she hung in her window when I was deployed. And it was a reminder to me that our families sacrifice a tremendous amount when our service members serve. And it's why we said, we've got to lean into this. We've got to address that. And we just have to thank them for that. But we need to do more than thanking them with just sort of words. We need to thank them with our actions and with our policies. And that is why we created Maryland Joint Forces. It's why last year we declared it the 2024, the year for the military family. It's why we passed 24 different bills that positively impact veterans and military families. That's because we recognize that we have to do more to show that appreciation for military kids, military spouses, our caregivers, and our survivors. They have sacrificed a tremendous amount for this country, and we owe them a debt of gratitude.
So wait a minute. You said when you came back from deployment and you saw the kind of stress and consternation on your mother's face, was that because she was worried about you? Is that what we were talking about?
That's exactly right. And I realized this pretty quickly over the course of my 2 deployments. I knew when I was out on a mission doing something dangerous, but I also knew exactly when I was at the internet cafe reading the news, or when I was having a meal, or when I was watching The West Wing on a DVD at my, in my room, right? Yeah. I knew when I was in danger, and I knew when I was not. The reality is my mom just knew that I was in Iraq and that she was reading headlines every single day of service members being killed. And she did not know when I was safe and when I was not. And that experience, I think, is universal to our military spouses, to people who have kids in the military, to our military kids. They don't know what is going on with their loved one because they can't talk about it for operational security purposes. They can't tell you when they're on a mission and when they're not, because that is risky. And so there's, that's one aspect of this. That's one facet of it. But it's a significant one, and it has a mental health toll or cost for our military connected community. And it's why it's so important that we be mindful of those risks and those challenges, and that we identify resources for them.
You talk about mental health, certainly for families, but more specifically as it relates to children and this conversation. What do children need that they have not historically had as children in military families, children of deployed parents, particularly, and I'm sure this is also an issue which we really didn't get into, where there may be 2 deployed parents.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this is why I was so glad to see when I got started in this role that in 2020, I believe it was, they passed legislation, or maybe it was 2022. Sorry for that. They passed legislation to enact a Purple Star Schools program at the encouragement of the Department of Defense. And I mentioned this a little earlier, but in 2024, we had 8 Purple Star schools come online. I'm very happy to report in 2025, we will now see 23 schools come online. And it's just so important that our schools, especially those that are not on military installations or near military installations, it's the ones that are further away, or our National Guard, our military reserve. And most folks don't realize it, but most of our military families don't live on an installation. They live outside of an installation in our communities. And so it's why it's so important that we have schools and administrators who understand that there are resources that are available for these young people. It's what encourages them to ask more questions about that military connected kid and their experience. It's what helps them understand, well, are they acting up because there's a different behavioral issue, or are they acting up because they're stressed because their parent is deployed right now, right? And so it allows for more curiosity. It opens the conversation, it encourages, and then it helps to match them with the resources they need. Because you're right, we see significant mental health resource needs. We see a need to make sure that our young people, when they're transferring from school to school, their individual academic programs are transferring seamlessly, right? We know that it's important that we help to ensure that their other parent, the non-military parent, is able to get a good job when they come to Maryland, because when you reduce the financial strain on that household, it makes it better for everyone in that household, right? And so I just think that's why we've got to take this holistic look at the service member's entire family and realize they all have unique individual needs that we have to address.
In this final minute or so, what else would you like to share? And is there something in particular that you want civilians in Maryland to know about military families and military children?
I would want to just encourage everyone across the state to recognize we all have a role to play in properly thanking members of the military connected community. It goes beyond the words, and it actually is all about encouraging, stepping up, getting involved, and helping to find a way to address the challenges that a military service member or their family or a veteran might face. What can you do to hire veterans and military spouses and bring them into your organization? Can you ensure that you ask whether somebody who is in front of you is military connected, to open up a whole new conversation with them and bring about different resources that might be beneficial to them? Can you invest in mentoring or providing support to a military connected young person? It's the little things, they add up. Can you create an opportunity to serve alongside military connected folks so they can feel a connection to their community? It's those things that go a long way in helping to make Maryland the best state in the nation to be a member of the military connected community. That is our vision. I think we're going in a wonderful direction, and it takes all of us to get involved and to step up and to be involved in creating that kind of community. And I'm thankful that we have a state that's willing to do it.
Secretary Tony Woods, Maryland Department of Veterans and Military Families, thank you so much for your service, the work that you're doing. I appreciate your time, sir, and good luck to you.
Harold, thank you so much, and I appreciate your listeners.
That is the Daily Drum for this Wednesday, April 9th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.